In this video, we will be discussing the rectangular coordinate system and graphs. So we will show you the basics on how to graph on the coordinate plane. This corresponds to section 2.1 from the free college algebra textbook on OpenStax. You can find the website for that within this video. So first of all, you have two axes. You have an x-axis and a y-axis. You can see that the x-axis is the horizontal line and the y-axis is the vertical line. This point where the two axes meet is called the origin, and that is an agreed upon point of 0, 0. So this is kind of the starting point where you're starting on the x-axis and the y-axis, where you've moved no times to the left or right or up or down. As you move to the right on the x-axis, the numbers get larger. These are the positives to the right of the origin. To the left of the origin are negative numbers. The numbers get smaller. Likewise, on the y-axis, as you move above the origin, the numbers get larger. Those are the positives. And below the x-axis, below the origin, the numbers get smaller, and it's the negative numbers. You can see the quadrant 1, we start in the upper right-hand corner. That's because those are the positives. They're positive x and positive y values. And then you go counterclockwise. So quadrant 1, 2, 3, 4, going counterclockwise. Okay. The x-intercept, or intercepts, depending on your graph, is where the graph crosses the x-axis. You can find x-intercepts by letting y equal 0 and solving for x. The y-intercept is where a graph crosses the y-axis, and you can find those by letting x equal 0 and solving for y. So notice that if you're finding an x-intercept, you let y be 0. So you always let the other variable be 0 from the intercept that you want to find. So if you're finding the y-intercept, you let x be 0. This is something we're going to use throughout this course. We're going to use this multiple times in multiple sections. So you need to make sure you know how to find an x and y intercept. Okay, so let's practice with that. Number 1, find the x and y intercept. So first, we're going to find the x-intercept, and you find that by letting y equal 0. So I'm going to just plug in 0 where I see a y, and then solve for x. So 4 times 0 is 0. Then I need to add 1 to both sides because I want to get the x by itself. So then I will have 2x equals 1. Divide by 2. I'm going to have to go up here. I'm out of space. So I had 2x equals 1. I need to divide by 2 to get the x by itself. So I'll have x equals 1/2. Remember, if it's asking for an intercept has to be written as an ordered pair, which means you have the x value first, the y value second, and it's parentheses. So the x is 1/2, and we let y be 0. So that is the x-intercept. Okay? Now we want to find the y-intercept. So to find the y-intercept, we let x be 0. So I'm going to plug 0 in for the x value. So I will have 4y equals 2 times 0 minus 1. So 2 times 0 is 0. So that'll be 4y equals 0 minus 1. And then 0 minus 1 is negative 1. And then to get the y by itself, we're going to divide by 4. So y equals negative 1/4. Again, we're looking for an intercept, which is a point. So the x value, we let x be 0, and we found the y value to be negative 1/4. So there is the y-intercept. All right, so that's how you find x and y intercepts in a linear equation. Number 2, solve the equation for y in terms of x. So solve the equation for y. That means they want us to get y by itself. So we're going to isolate the y. So first we need to undo this 3x. So since it's a positive 3x, we're going to subtract 3x from both sides. So we will get negative 2y equals negative 3x plus 6. Remember that you can't add that negative 3 and the 6 because the negative 3 is with the x. So negative 3x and 6 are not like terms. Then we want to divide by negative 2. Remember, you have to divide the entire side by negative 2. So you'll get y equals negative 3 divided by negative 2 is positive 3/2 x. Positive 6 divided by negative 2 is negative 3. So I divided each of the pieces by negative 2. And that is solved for y in terms of x. When it says in terms of x, that just means that the variable you're going to see on the other side is x. The main directions here are solve for y. That tells you to get the y by itself. Be comfortable doing that because you're going to do that quite a few times throughout this chapter. Okay, so here are some pieces of information you need to know. You need to know the distance formula, which is given right here with the d equals. So let's see, this is the distance formula given 2 points. So you're using 2 points that you're given, and by using those 2 points you can find the distance between them using that formula. So if I use that formula, I have x1, y1, x2, y2. I label the first point with 1s and the second point with 2s, but that's completely arbitrary. You could label them the other way if you wanted. I like to label them because then it's really easy for me to see which numbers go where in the formula above. So d, the distance, equals the square root of x2, so x2 is 7, minus x1, which is 2, squared, plus y2 is 4, minus y1 is a negative 5. So if I have minus a negative 5, those two negatives are going to make a positive, so it's going to end up being plus 5 squared. Okay, so let's talk about that again. This is a minus in the formula, and y1 is a negative. So those two negatives combine to give me that positive. I like to try to use as least signs as possible so it doesn't get confusing. Okay, so now I'm going to simplify. So 7 minus 2 is 5, and 4 plus 5 is 9. So I do what's in parentheses first. Then I'm going to raise the numbers to the exponents. So 5 squared is 25, plus 9 squared is 81. I then need to add those together. So it looks like that'll be 106. Whoops, 81 plus 25, 106. Okay, and then you want to try to reduce if you can. So remember, once you get your radical simplified, or get it to this point, you're going to do a prime factor tree. So this will be 2 times 53, and then I believe 53 is prime, 2 is prime, so then this can't be reduced. So this would be your exact answer. Okay, so let's read the directions. What did it say? Find the distance between the 2 points. Give both the exact answer and an estimate. Okay, so here is the exact answer. The estimate they want you to actually take the square root of 106 and round it. So 106, the square root of that. So this is going to be the same, and it says to round to the hundredths place. So the hundredths place is 2 numbers after the decimal. So if I write down, I get 10.29563. Okay, so let's talk about where to round. This is important. If you do not round correctly, you will not earn credit on the quizzes or tests. So you have to make sure you know how to round. So the hundredths place is 2 numbers after the decimal. So this is tenths, hundredths. Okay, so the 9 is in the hundredths place. You're going to use this number after the 9 to decide how to round. If it's 5 or greater, you round the 9 up. If it's less than 5, you keep the 9 the same. So since it's a 5, we round the 9 up. Well, up means to a 0, which is like a 10, right? And then the 2 will round to a 3. So 29 will round to 30, right? So the estimate would be 10.30. And since it says to the hundredths place, you have to put that 0 to give a number in the hundredths place. If you just wrote 10.3, then it looks like you rounded to the tenths place. So you want to make sure you round to the hundredths place. This is your estimate. Okay, so exact answer versus estimate. All right, next we're going to look at the midpoint. So the midpoint is the point that is halfway between two endpoints on a line segment. So if you have two endpoints, you can find the point that is exactly in the middle of those 2 points. Really all you're doing is averaging out the x's, because that's the middle, right? And then averaging out the y's. That is this formula. Notice there are parentheses around it because this is an ordered pair. This is going to be an x value and this is going to be a y value, right? So your answer should be in an ordered pair form because it is an ordered pair. So again, I think it's helpful to label so that it's really easy to see what's going to go where in the formula. So the midpoint, notice this is a capital M. Later we'll see a formula with a lowercase m. The lowercase m is the slope. The uppercase m is the midpoint. Okay, so we're going to find the midpoint of the line segment that joins the 2 given points. So our midpoint is going to equal x1, -5, plus x2 is -2 over 2. y1 is -3 plus y2 is -8 all over 2. So don't get confused with the signs. You can either combine these plus and negatives into one sign, which is a negative, or you can see that this is just adding 2 negatives. Or you can just use your calculator, right? So -5 plus a -2 is -7 over 2. And then -3 plus -8 is -11 over 2. Neither of those fractions can be reduced. So this is it. This is your midpoint. Okay. Now we're going to, whoops. All right, we're going to plot the points on the coordinate plane. So here we have a grid. You can see the x-axis is the horizontal axis and the y-axis is the vertical axis. Remember that each of these points represents an x and a y. So the x value tells you from the origin which direction you should go. So if the x value is positive, you go to the right. If it's negative, you go to the left. And then the y value, starting at the origin, if it's positive, you go up. If it's negative, you go down. And this is going to tell you where you should move. So for 4, 1, that means 4 to the right, up 1. You don't put a point after you move to the right 4. You have to wait until you use both numbers. So over 4, up 1 is here. So we're going to call that point A. Okay. Point B, let's do in blue. So the x is -2 and the y is 3. So we're going to go left 2, down 3. No, not down, right? The 3 is positive. Left 2, up 3. So left 2 because it's -2 in the x direction, and up 3 because it's 3 positive in the y direction. So this will be B. All right, C. For some reason, these are the ones that sometimes throw people off, are the ones with a 0. So 5 is in the x part, right? So that's going to be 5 to the right, and then up and down 0. So this is an x-intercept. Notice the y is 0. That's how you know it's an x-intercept. If we look at D, you can see that the x is 0. That means it'll be a y-intercept. So x is 0, we move left and right 0, but y is -1, so we move down 1, and that will be point D. All right, so make sure you're comfortable graphing points on a grid. We will be doing this more in future sections, and we'll be connecting them into lines or other shapes of the graph.